Okay, welcome everyone to Learn to Crochet with Moogly. So Tamara Kelly is here hosting today our Learn to Crochet class. You probably know her from her blog called Moogly. She is a wizard at crochet. We are sponsored today by our friends at I Like Crochet. My name is Jenny Bowden. I work at Fave Crafts. I've worked there for about 10 years. And we are super excited to be having these virtual classes this year. So Tamara, if you want to hit the next slide.
All righty. There we go.
Okay. So I also wanted to share with you guys a little bit more about I Like Crochet. Our wonderful sponsor has put together a fantastic deal for just you guys today. Normally it's almost $50 for a 1-year subscription to this digital magazine. It's all about crochet. All of the patterns are tech edited, no advertisements. They publish 6 times a year. It's a really great resource for free crochet, or not free crochet patterns, for just tons of great crochet patterns for you guys to practice what you learned today. Again, 75% off the regular price of $47.64. So this is an introductory offer for a 1-year membership to I Like Crochet. It's only $11.88. There's a link here at the bottom. I'll also put it in the chat for you guys. So it's a great resource. You can give it as a gift, or you can gift yourself this wonderful digital magazine. It is all digital. You won't get anything, mailed to you, but like I said, they publish 6 times a year, and it's just, you also get access to all of their archived issues as well. So just tons and tons of great inspiration of crochet patterns. So, okay, we are going to go ahead and get started with the class. We are recording today, and we will be sending a link tomorrow after the class, 24 hours after the class, a link to the video recording. So please don't panic if you aren't here in person, if you come late. If you want to practice your skills, you will have access to the video after today. What else am I forgetting? The Q&A section, a lot of you guys have already posted some questions in here. So if you have questions throughout the class, please use the Q&A feature. I will do my best to answer them in person as we go. Otherwise, we will try to get them all answered after the class. So, okay, take it away.
All right. So hi, I'm Tamara from Moogly, which you probably haven't heard of before if you don't know how to crochet, but that's what I do. I crochet, I do a few other crafts, but I'm really passionate about crochet, and that's how I got my start. So as Jenny was just saying, this is a recorded class. So if we were in person, I was saying this a little bit before we started recording and before everybody was here, but if we were in person, I would probably spend the first hour with you just going over the slip knot and getting the chaining down. That's not going to work in video. You don't want to sit there and watch me chain for an hour. So we're going to kind of quickly go through a whole bunch of skills, but they all build on each other, one after the other. So today, what I'm hoping is that you can learn about some yarn, learn about the hooks, and pick up those first couple skills, that slip knot and the chain, and practice your chains while you stick with us, watch the rest of the video. And I think you'll see how really each one of those skills builds upon the other. Go ahead and try the different things, but don't expect to have, a beautiful scarf by the end of this, by the end of the hour. It would take longer than an hour to make a scarf anyway. So I want you to go ahead and watch along today and get the idea and see how it works. And then you can keep coming back to this video as you're ready for each new skill, so you can add that on. So with that said, let's go ahead and go to the hand camera so you guys can see what I've got in front of me today. All right, I'm going to slide it on over here. Okay, so besides yarn, which is kind of an obvious one, you definitely need crochet hooks. So if you're not familiar with crochet or crochet hooks, there are lots and lots and lots of different style of hooks. And these are obviously all different sizes. And what you want to look for when you're picking up a hook to practice with or to make a pattern is, and I'm going to try and get it to focus here. If I put my hand behind it, there we go. You can see where it says N9mm. The 9mm is the most important part. If you're trying to follow a written pattern, or if you're looking at a yarn ball label, which I'll show you here in a minute, there's a recommended hook size. Look for that millimeter measurement. That's going to be your best bet. And most hook brands will have that right on the hook itself. Not all of them do, but most of them do. So in terms of what kind of hook to use what kind of hook is best to use, Susan Bates and Boy hooks are the probably 2 ones that you're going to see in most of your craft stores. And these are great hooks, whether you're a beginner or an experienced crocheter. But there are lots, of course, of other hook styles. So you can play around as you continue to crochet and find the hook style that's going to work best for you. There's no right or wrong way to hold your hook, and there's no right or wrong hook. It's what's comfortable for you, the crocheter. So the other tools you'll want to look at investing in as you crochet are stitch markers, which I have right here. And if you don't have stitch markers right away, you can use paper clips or anything like that. These are just really handy little doodads to have. They're going to help you keep track of your stitches. They're going to help you know, what's the last stitch, what's the first stitch of a row. They'll help you keep count. They're just really handy. And you want the ones that open up like this for crochet. There's two kinds of stitch markers on the market, and the ones that don't open up are just for knitting. So if you're crocheting, you definitely want to get the ones that open. And then the other thing, I didn't mention this in the class materials, but it is something you'll want to invest in eventually, is a yarn needle. Now, a yarn needle is just like any other needle, except it's bigger, so you can get the yarn through the top. Sometimes they have a little curve in it or a little bend. Sometimes they don't. Doesn't matter. Again, that's personal preference. So those are the basics on the tools. So let me sort of slide those to the side here. And then I want to talk about the yarn itself. There are so many different amazing yarns on the market, and you should absolutely explore them all. But as you do, the things I really want you to look for are right here on the back. There's this whole series of little symbols right there. And that first one right there, you see the little, looks like a little yarn ball. If I kind of hold it up real close there. And you can see it's got a 6 in it. This means this is a super bulky yarn. So it's a little bit thicker of a yarn. If I pull up this one right here, this is Lily Sugar and Cream. I'm sure you've probably seen this in your big box stores. This one has that little yarn symbol. It's a little smaller because it's a smaller label, but it's got a 4. This means it's a medium weight yarn. So this can go all the way from basically 1 to 7 is what you're going to see in the stores. 7 would be the thickest. 1 would be tiny little thin stuff. So when you're beginning to learn how to crochet, I really recommend picking up maybe a skein of this yarn or something like it in a 4. This is a good medium weight. This is probably the most popular weight. And it's just, easy to find everywhere. Lots of great, easy patterns. You can start out making washcloths and, scarves, whatever you want to make with this. But in addition to that little symbol there with the size, if we go a little further here, I'm going to hold this up real close. We've got the recommended size of hook. This one right here with the little cross, and it's kind of hard to see there. Those are knitting needles. And that right there is a tiny little hook. And right underneath, it says USH/8. Those are sort of the American names for the hook. But especially as you begin, I really recommend you look for that millimeter. That's going to be universal. That's going to be across all brands, no matter where you're from or where you're buying your hooks. You look for that millimeter. So for our project today for practicing, we're going to be using a smooth worsted weight yarn, which is a number 4 like this, and an H hook or a 5 millimeter right there. Now, in addition to those things, you'll also, of course, want to pay attention to your care instructions. Just like clothes, all yarn needs different types of care. And then on this part of the label, I just want to show you right here. I've actually used a little bit of this, so it's taped back together. But you want to keep an eye out for die lots. Let me see if it's a little easier to find here on this one. There we are. So you'll want to look for the numbers on the label. Right there, I believe, is the die lot for this one. If you're making a project with lots and lots of balls of yarn, you want to make sure they all have the same die lot for the same color. Otherwise, I could get a different die lot of this gray and it would be just a slightly different gray. So that's just something to look for. Now, I did see a little question pop up about smooth. Cotton is a great example, or a great one to use for smoothness. Let me grab one from behind me here, so I can show you, because I didn't anticipate that question. Sorry about that. This would be obviously a very not smooth yarn. This was the closest one I had to hand. Very sparkly and fun, but absolutely terrible for learning with, because you're not going to be able to see what you're doing or see any of your stitches. So by smooth, I just mean something where you can kind of actually see the strand of yarn, and it's not going to get lost in fuzziness or all the cool sparkly excitement, which is really fun once you've got the hang of it. But when you're learning, try and pick something really nice and smooth. So I'm going to set this.
I do want to interrupt. We have a few questions if you're going to be covering the magic chain and the magic circle today. I don't know if that's included in your mug rug. But...
no, I don't know. I know the magic circle. I hadn't planned on covering the magic circle simply because it's for working in the round, which is a further skill. That's what you first you work in rows, then you learn to work in the round. If we have time at the very end of the class, I'll be happy to show you the magic circle. The magic chain, perfect. I wish I knew what that was. It sounds amazing. I'm going to have to Google that.
Maybe she meant the magic circle. Or maybe I misread. She said she's struggling with the magic chain. I know how it works in principle, but I keep ending up with a knot and the chain won't close. Elizabeth, if you want to repost a question, maybe I'm not understanding
Guessing
properly.
that's a way of also working in the round, maybe like an adjustable ring.
Okay.
But you know, this is one of the harder things about crochet. There are lots of standard abbreviations like SC for single crochet, DC for double crochet, which I'll be talking about here shortly. But unfortunately, there's lots of names that people make up too. There just aren't standard names for a lot of things. So unfortunately, sometimes somebody will come up with a really cool name for a technique that they may have even come up with themselves. So I'm afraid I don't know what that is. I'll have to Google that one.
Yeah, she's in the UK too.
I'm excited to learn though. That sounds interesting.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry. I'm just automatically, my fingers are crocheting without me even thinking about it. Okay, so first thing I want to talk about is the slip knot. And the slip knot is basically the knot in the beginning of a knot that we put in our yarn, a little loop that we can use to start crocheting. We need to get a loop in there that's not going to go away. So what we do, I'm going to actually move my camera just a little bit lower if I can for this, although nope, it's already as low as it can go. I'll bring it up to you. All right. We have the end of the yarn here. This is the end of our yarn, so go ahead and find the end of the skein. We want to go in about 6 or 7 inches. So there's the end, go in about 6 or 7 inches on the yarn. Then what we're going to do is we're going to create a loop. Just lay, and try that again here. Lay that loop right over, like so. Okay? Then we bring that tail behind the loop. Just like that. Then we put our hook, and pull it up a little closer here so you can see. We're going to go under just that tail bit right in the center. You see my hooks over those 2 pieces that I looped over. And then when I pull on the ends of my yarn, both the tail and the end that's attached to the skein, that will pull down and make a knot. And this is a slip knot because we can just pull and make it the same size as our hook. Now we don't want to make this super duper tight. If you make it too tight, you won't be able to use it to make stitches into. So you want to leave a little bit of room. And with this slip knot, you can give a little tug down on that knot and open it right back up if you need to. So you just want to have about the size of your hook, not the part down here. You want to go ahead and make sure you're doing this on the part of your hook that's called the shaft, where it's nice and straight on the sides. This is the part of the hook that will help determine the size of your loops. So that's the part you want to look at when you're making your slip knot. And don't worry, I'm going to do that again, but I just want to show you there. So you can see it's just a little bit bigger. There's a little extra room there to work into. So I'm going to pull my hook out. And this is the great thing about all crochet stuff. We give those ends a tug and it just disappears and we can start over. No harm done. So what we want to do, again, we find that end of our yarn, go in about 6 or 7 inches. If you're using really thick, bulky yarn, you'll want to go even further because each stitch will eat up so much more yarn. Then we're going to create a loop by just laying it right over like that. Bring that tail end right behind the loop, like so. And then we put our hook just under that end and pull down on the cut end and the end attached to the skein. And that is how we make our slip knot. And you can just tighten that up a little bit, loosen it up a little bit, pull your hook out, pull it out all together, start over as many times as you need. Now, the slip knot is something that a lot of people get stuck on. And in fact, it was something I didn't figure out until I was 6 months into crocheting myself. So there's a couple different alternatives you can do if you're really stuck and just not getting the slip knot, but you want to go ahead and get to the chaining. What you can do is lay down your hook and just go ahead and tie a double knot. Just make sure you leave that little extra room to work into later. Now, this isn't going to be great for your finished projects, but it's a great way to get started and get learning. So you would just go ahead and tie a little double knot in there, leaving just enough space so you can work a little bit. It's not adjustable, so you can't really, you can't adjust it. Once you've made that knot, it's on there, and if it's the wrong size, you're going to need to cut it out, but it will help you get started if the slip knot is just not working for you. So let me go ahead and oops, I cut the wrong side of the yarn. Let me cut that knot out of there, like so. There we go, and set that aside. All right, and then I'm going to go ahead and make that slip knot one more time, and then we'll get to the chaining. So I've got my end, I go in about 6 inches, create my loop, pull that tail behind the loop, and insert my hook under that tail, just the tail, and pull down both those ends. Okay, so we've got our slip knot on the hook. And then this is the part I want you to go ahead and keep practicing while we're watching here today. This is chaining, and this is the basis for everything we do in crochet. If once you've got the chaining down, you've got most of the basic motions that you're going to need for all the other stitches. So this is why I really want you to practice this one. What we're going to do is what's called a yarn over. And you'll see I'm holding the hook in one hand and I'm holding the yarn in the other, but you can hold the hook and yarn however is comfortable for you. Some people prefer to hold the hook like this. That's totally fine. I just happen to like to hold it like this. That's just me. So what we're going to do is a yarn over. We're going to bring the yarn, and this is the end attached to the skein, not the tail. That just hangs out there until we're done. We're going to bring that yarn over our hook from behind. So let me do that motion again. We're going to bring our yarn behind the hook and up and over it, like so. Then we pull that loop that yarn over essentially through that loop that was on our hook. And that is our first chain. Not what's on the hook, that's our active loop that we're working with. But right there, right next to our slip knot, that is our very first chain. So let's do that again. We yarn over, so from the back to the front, over the top of the hook, and then we pull that right through that loop. And now we have 2 chains. So I'm going to do that a few more times here. Yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through, yarn over, pull through. And that's the motion for chaining. And that's what you need to practice. You'll see too, I'm putting a little bit of tension with a couple of my extra fingers here on that chain that I'm making. That helps everything kind of keep straightened out so that it doesn't try and wiggle around on my hook as I'm making those stitches. So all of this is going to feel very, very strange if you've never done this before. And that's okay. It felt very strange for me too. I genuinely wish I had kept some of my swatches from when I was learning how to crochet, because I would love to show people now, we all start off in the same place. Absolutely. So you can see I'm just pulling those loops right through, and I'm kind of choking up, kind of like in baseball. I'm choking up on that chain a little bit to help me keep that tension on there and hold everything still as I pull those loops through. And then I'm going to pull my hook out here for just a moment so we can take a closer look at this chain we've just made. Let's look at that right there. So right down there is our slip knot, and we've made all these chains. And on top of the chain here, if I hold it this way, you can see it sort of looks like a little V. Let me pull my hand out of there. There's a V nestled inside the next V, inside the next V. Each one of those little V's is one chain that we've made. And this right here is the top of our chain. If we turn it over, we'll see the bottom of the chain. And this is the side where it kind of looks like, and this is going to sound silly, but it's my favorite analogy. It looks like the Loch Ness Monster peeking up over the lake, that iconic picture we've all seen, right? With those little humps going across the lake. That is the back of our chain right there. So after you've practiced chaining and you're ready to move on to the other stitches, we're going to be working back into these chains. And where you work into the chain really is up to you. If you're following instructions for a pattern, they tell you to work into a particular part of the chain, then you should absolutely do that. If you're just swatching and playing around on your own, you can work into whatever part of that chain you want. If you want to work under the top 2 loops, or if you want, and all of this will make a little bit more sense here as I demonstrate, but as you can work under that bottom loop, totally up to you. You just want to be consistent, at least for that project. You can always change it on the next swatch or the next project. So that really is the basic motion of chaining. And if you make chains that you don't like, just like our slip knot, just give it a tug and they just disappear.
Yeah, I was going to say, Virginia just said my chain got really loose. Do I start over?
I'd go ahead and pull a few of those out. You're going to be doing a lot of chaining as you're learning to crochet. Like I say, this is kind of the basis for all of this. So once you can chain really, really well, the rest of it will probably, along with this video, click pretty easily for you. We just want to yarn over, make sure we bring that yarn from the back over the top of the hook and pull it through. And the other thing I want to say is you'll notice I've got that yarn looped over my hand, but it's loose. I'm not holding on to it with an iron grip. If I if I hold on to it too tightly, what I'll end up doing is making really tight chains. I'm going to go ahead and do a couple of those here. These chains where I have to really kind of pull to get that hook right through the loop. Let me pull that hoop out of the way. You can see how those are significantly smaller. And because I had trouble pulling the hook through those chains, I'm going to have a lot of trouble getting back into those chains to make stitches. So I'm going to go ahead and pull those out. You want to make sure that those chains, kind of like your slip knot, there's just enough room left in there, just a little bit of wiggle room. And it will take practice. It'll take a lot of practice to get really even on your chains, and that's okay. That's to be expected. That's the way it's supposed to be. But you can just keep practice your chaining for the rest of this video. But now I'd like to show you some of the other stitches. So what we want to do now is we want to start our first row, which means we're going to start working into the chain. To do that, we're going to have to account for what's called a turning chain. Now, this first row I'm going to make is going to be all single crochets. So what we're going to do is that chain closest to the hook. Now, remember, that's not the loop that's on the hook. That's the last chain we actually made. That one, we are going to skip as the turning chain. Now, I forgot about the left-handed thing. Let me try and flip it over. I'll make a couple chains real quick if I can. Oof. Again, not naturally left-handed. I'll do what I can here. You can see I'm having a little bit of a struggle here. So what I'm going to do from left-handed version of a chain, yarn over, and then, oh gosh, this is where it's going to fail. I'm going to try, so not left-handed. If I hold on to it here, maybe I can get it through. Well, yeah, again, I'll do what I can, but I'm not naturally left-handed, so there we are. Pull that through. There we are. I had to actually glance away from the camera and really concentrate to do that, so hopefully you got that. I'll do one more. Yarn over and pull that through. There we go. So that's what chaining looks like in the left hand. So, and you can see, because I'm not left-handed, those chains are a little wonkier than the other ones. Again, totally normal, because if I decided to learn how to crochet today, even right-handed, that's what they would look like. All right, so let's go ahead and try and move to row 2 here with some single crochets. What we're going to do, I was talking about the turning chain. The turning chain is like a little ladder that we use to lift us up to the height we need to for our first row. If we just started crocheting right in that first stitch, it'd be real pinched and short on one side because those stitches have height. So that turning chain is our little ladder. And depending on what kind of stitch you're going to be making, that little ladder might need to be taller and have 2 or 3 or even 4 chains, or you might just have that one chain. So what we're going to do is we're going to skip that chain that's closest to our hook and start working into the chain after that. My personal preference, and what I'm going to recommend if you're learning, is to go into that back of the chain. And here's the reason. Then you only need to get your hook under that one loop, okay? That's how we're going to be working to the chains. I'm going to go ahead and pull that out and do it again. We want to get our hook under that loop. Now, if you're having trouble finding that and you want to try the single crochets, just go ahead and pick a loop of your chain. It's okay if your first things are wonky and you're just trying to practice the movements. But let me pull that out again. You can see we're skipping that chain closest to our hook. We insert our hook into the next chain, and we've still got that active loop on there. And now we're under the chain. We're going to yarn over again. So we bring that yarn up over our hook and pull it just through the chain, like so. Now we've got 2 loops on our hook. So we yarn over again and pull through both of those loops. And that is a single crochet. Let me hold that real still there. All right, let's do it again.
Quick, we do have a few questions when you can about how to count, and do you count the first one, and how, please show us where the first chain is.
Okay. Well, let me go ahead and come back here. We've got right there, get it straight out a little bit. There is our slip knot. So remember, we've got those little V's. Each of those V's is one chain. So we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, etc. If you prefer, if it's easier for you, you can find those little Loch Ness humps and count those instead. There's still just 1 per chain. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, etc. Now, Finding your stitches can genuinely be difficult. I know that learning to visually basically read your crochet is one of the bigger challenges. So that is something where these stitch markers can come in really, really handy. If you have these, or if you have like paper clips or something else that you want to use, that's fine. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and pull that active loop out of the way. So we've got just that single crochet right there. I'm going to put this stitch marker, excuse me, right under those top 2 loops of the single crochet. So let's take a closer look at the anatomy of the single crochet. Here's the front of the stitch. Here's the top of the stitch. You'll notice there's another V right there. And that is what the back of the stitch looks like. So I know it kind of looks like a mess right now, but as you keep stitching and paying attention to what you're doing, what you're creating with your hook, that'll become a little clearer. So what I want to do is take this stitch marker and put it right under those top 2 loops there. That will help me know that when I turn and come back for another row, that this is the last stitch of the row, or rather the first stitch of this row, so I won't end up accidentally working over here into our turning chain. I just want to work into the top of that stitch. So I'm going to reinsert my hook in the loop, and you can see here when I do that, when I tug down, the loop that's moving, the half of the loop that's moving is on the back of my hook. What we want to do is turn that around and put my hook in the other way. When you tug down on the yarn, the side of the loop that moves, you see that moving right there? That's the side of the loop that we want in front of our hook. That'll keep your stitches from twisting. So let's go ahead and make a few more single crochets together. We're going to look at our chain and go ahead and take your time and really look at it and find that next hump, or that next V of the next chain that you want to work into. Put your hook, and you're going to go from front to back, so closest to you to furthest away. That's the direction. Like so. There we are, see? Now we've got the loop on our hook and we're in the chain. So we yarn over, pull up just through that chain. Now we've got 2 loops on our hook. We yarn over and pull through 2. And that is our second single crochet. Let's take a couple more, and then we're going to look at how we count those. We go into the next chain, yarn over, pull up a loop, yarn over, and pull through 2. Look for the next chain, insert our hook, yarn over, pull up a loop, and yarn over and pull through 2. And I want to point out too, when you go back to watch this on YouTube, if you lose the little gear icon in the corner, you can really slow down the video or speed it up to whatever speed you need to help you out. So sometimes it's hard to slow down a little too much because then it just starts falling off your hook. So here we've got our 4 single crochets we've made, and let's look at those little V's there. I've been going under the back hump, but you can go under the V if you like of the chain. But on the top of our single crochets, now we've got V's here. So if I turn it this way, it's a little easier to see how they look like V's, but we can count each of those V's is 1 single crochet. 1, 2, 3, 4. So that is how we count our stitches. That's the easiest way. But as you take a look at them, it's also a good idea to really just examine the stitches, take a look at them, see how they look when you make them, like so. Now, it does matter if you yarn over from the front or the back. If you yarn over from the front, you get a different stitch. And this is something that's been catching popularity. So if you want to yarn under, specifically patterns that are going to call for a yarn under, we'll call that out. The standard is to yarn over. Okay, you can do some fun effects with the yarn undering, but that's for later. So let's do a couple more single crochets here, and then I think it's probably time for our break.
I was just gonna say we've just hit 1:30, yep. So we're back.
All right, so a couple more single crochets just before we take our break, and then we'll move on to the next skill. What we're going to do is insert our hook in the next chain. You can see there I went under that back hump. If I'd gone under the top 2 loops, there they are. I'm really going into the same space. It's just the side you approach it from. So there's the top 2 loops of the chain, and there's the underneath hump. So then we yarn over, pull that loop through, and yarn over and pull through 2 for a single crochet. Okay, and then should I go to share screen?
Yeah, let's do that. And then maybe when you get back from the break, we had a few questions about, can you show how to hold the yarn as your crochet?
Absolutely. Again, that's going to be something that you can do however is, most comfortable for you. So definitely play with it. I've seen people do it dozens of different ways. But I'll be happy to show you how I do it when we come back.
Great.
All right. So
Thanks.
about 3 minutes or so, 2 minutes.
Not even, probably
Okay.
just,
I'm going to take a run to the
30
ladies' room, so I
seconds.
will be right back.
Yeah, go for it.
All righty. And
Perfect.
then just tell me, I think we need to go to the next screen. Yes?
I can't see it
Up.
quite
A little
yet.
quicker on my end. Sorry. There we go. All right.
Perfect. Okay, so I just wanted to show you guys one more time this amazing deal from our sponsor, I Like Crochet. So it is 75% off the retail price of $47.64. So this is an introductory offer. I know some of you guys might already be subscribers already, which is wonderful. Thank you. But for those of you that are not subscribers currently, this is a wonderful one-time offer for 75% off the retail price. It is $11.88. For a 1-year subscription, plus you get access to all of the back issues as well. So it's a wonderful gift for yourself or for a friend. Let me see, I'm going to try to get to some of these questions also during the break. Let me see, she's going to talk about how do you hold the yarn when we get back, which is great. Kathy, if you leave, can you resume later? Yes, we are going to be recording this. We are recording this class and we will email out a link to the video tomorrow. We are going to be wrapping things up in about 30 minutes. So we're halfway through. So if you need to leave for 5 or 10 minutes, you want to come back in 10 minutes, we'll probably still be here. But if you need to go, you can always catch the recording. We'll be sending it out 24 hours after the event. So 1 o'clock tomorrow is when you'll get an email with the link to today's recording.
Okay. And I'm back. So.
All right. Yeah. Let's hop right back into it.
Okay. Let me hit the stop share button here. Joys of technology. All right. There we go. Okay. So how I hold the yarn in my hand. Let me kind of have to get in position and do it to think about it here because it's so unconscious, after a while. So here I have the my left hand, essentially my non-hook hand. And for me, I just drape the yarn right over my forefinger and then just kind of let it hang in front of the rest of my fingers. If I'm trying to make something where I do want a lot of really tight stitches, like I want a really stiff fabric, then I will just kind of squeeze those first two fingers together a little bit more. Some people have some really fancy ones. I've seen people who loop them over and have the pinky involved and all kinds of stuff. I actually wrote an article on my blog about this one time, asking people how they held their hook, but I got some really interesting answers on how they hold their yarn as well. There was a couple of different people who run it through their toes. So you can absolutely hold it however works for you. So you can definitely play with how you're holding your yarn, try different things, try it over 2 fingers, especially if you want to hold on to it a little tighter, especially as you're beginning. I just have to hold it this way. It's the way my hand wants to hold it. So that's for me. But again, you can hold it however is comfortable for you. You just want to be able to give it a little stability, so you're not just loosey-goosey, with yarn flopping around out there. Just, I guess, as I kind of close those ones too. It's so unconscious. But yeah, I kind of close my hand over those a little bit to give myself additional tension as needed as well.
Speaking of tension, real quick, we do have a couple questions. How do you manage tension of yarn? I have the same issue of loose chains. And then someone else is saying, how do you keep from getting stitches tighter as you go? My loops are getting tighter as I try to get into them.
That's what all that practice is for, genuinely. It happens to all of us. I actually just answered a question about this on YouTube for my knitter. She was having the same exact issue. Her last row was getting tighter and tighter and tighter. Relax is number one. Relax your shoulders. If they're too tight, if you're too loose, you don't need to relax anymore. But if they're too tight, try and really just relax your shoulders, relax your arms, maybe even put a pillow under each elbow. Anything that's going to help you stay relaxed is going to give you a little bit more relaxation in your hook. Also, just make sure you're not, iron gripping the end of the yarn attached to the skein. That's going to give you a little more play there on your hook. Now, if your stitches are too loose, that's when you need to grip the yarn just a little bit more, and again, just practice, practice, practice. A lot of people, especially getting started, find that their chains just always tend to be a little too tight. They can do the stitches fine, but their chains are always a little too tight. In that case, you can go ahead and make your chains with a bigger hook. Remember we talked about the size of this part right here? That's the part that's actually measured in the millimeters, not what's down here on the handle. It's this measurement up here. So that determines the size of those loops. So if you use a bigger hook to chain with, and then make the rest of your stitches with a smaller hook, it might be easier for you to get started. Same thing for, if your row is curling, it's just a matter of if it's curving, pull my hook out of the way here. If it's curving this way, it means your chains were a little tight. If it's curving this way, either your stitches are a little tight or your chains were a little loose. So you can kind of see, because these are the chains right here at the bottom. And here's our stitches. So again, this is the tension, this is the gauge, that tension level, the tightness of the stitches. That is why we make miles and miles and miles of chain. You can turn those chains into gift wrap, tie them to bows, give them to your kids for necklaces, bracelets. You can have some fun with them. Wind them around a coffee can and glue them down. You can do all kinds of fun stuff, but you're going to want to continue practice chaining for a while. Was there anything else I could cover before we get started again?
I have a question about pulling the yarn out of the yarn ball. I'm trying to scroll up. How do you
Okay.
start pulling your yarn from inside or outside the skein?
Well, for that, you kind of want to look at the construction of the skein. I'm kind of looking around me now, seeing what I've got available to hand. This one right here is one that I would usually recommend pulling from the outside. You can pull from the outside, but this style of skein is more likely to tangle. And what I'm looking at here when I'm saying that is the way that it's wound. You can see how it kind of makes a triangle. You can see those different bits overlapping there and how they put the skein together. This particular style tells me this is going to be best pulled from the outside. Some people really hate pulling from the outside, but some skeins just aren't designed for center pull. Now, this is the Lily Sugar and Cream. This one wouldn't be so bad for center pull. It would actually be pretty good. It's a little dark. There, if I hold it down, you can see it a little better. Can you see how there are layers? They don't really cross over. It's almost like I could go in and pull out that whole center section like a swirl. This tells me it's going to be much better for a center pull, that I can see the layers there. It means it's going to pull out a lot smoother and be a lot less likely to get tangled. Or I'm going to go ahead and teach you a fun term you might not have heard before. It's called yarn barf. Child of the 80s and 90s, what can I say? But if you try and pull sometimes from the center, even from a center pull skein, you're going to get a whole little chunk of yarn that comes with it, more than that end that you were hoping for. Happens to everybody. It happens to me all the day, all the time. And I've been doing this for like 20 years now. It's just part of it. You just kind of wind it back up nicely and then start working from that end, and eventually you've used it all up. So that's the sort of thing you want to look for. If you see cakes at the store, which are the ones that are kind of big and round, and you can really see all those beautiful layers, those are almost always center pull. But you can always work from the outside too. If you're making a project and you want the other color at the other end, go ahead and pull from the outside. No harm done. You can always pull from the outside. You may not always want to pull from the inside.
Okay.
Anything else, or?
We have some specific questions. I don't know if we
Okay.
get to all of them, but I will try to just rattle off a few. Let's see. May is asking, there is a way to chain instead of making a long chain. Could you show that? I don't know.
Okay. I see. I think she's asking for foundation stitches, foundation chains. Yes, there is a way to do that. That is definitely a more advanced skill. Again, if we get to the end and by some miracle we've got a few minutes, I'd be happy to go over it. But I would say that's definitely more of an intermediate skill. You'll want to have these other stitches down before you try and do that, just because you need to know the anatomy of the stitch to really understand how foundation stitches work.
Perfect.
So
see, Christina, can you show how to single crochet into the chain by not going into the back of the chain?
Absolutely. Let me go ahead. I'm just going to go pull these on out. Just like I said, pull them all out and they just go away. There we go. Find that last loop, just go ahead and pull it up with your fingers there till you can get your hook in it. Make sure that when you pull down on it, it's in front of the hook and you're all ready to go again. So let's go ahead and crochet into the top of the chain. I'm still going to skip because I'm making single crochet, and that's the short stitch. We're just going to skip one chain. We go to the next one and then this is why I told you to go back. It's a little trickier. You've got to get your hook under both of those top loops. Now, if we turn it over, we still just have the one on the back. That's what we were doing before. But now we've just got it positioned a little differently. So those top two loops are on top of our hook. So then just as before, we yarn over, pull through, yarn over, and pull through two. And we can go ahead and mark that stitch again, just as we did. And you'll notice when I take my hook out, unless I'm, taking it out to go across the room and help one of my kids, I like to put my active loop over my finger. That just helps keep it really nice and straight and ready for me when I come back. There we are. So then I can put my hook right in there, and I know it hasn't gotten twisted on me. So let's do a couple more into the top of the chain. We go under those top 2 loops. There's 1 and there's 2, both of the loops that are part of the V there. So again, you can see there's just 1 loop there on the back. That's how you know you're in the right spot. So then we yarn over, pull up and through, yarn over, and pull through 2. There we go. So then we look for our next chain. We always look for our next chain. So after you've turned, we've got 1 turning chain. So you just skip the chain closest to the hook, that just the one, and work into the next one. So now we can see that's the next chain there.
Please review which is the first stitch to go into once you have turned.
Right. Okay, let me pull these out again. All right. Get that hook back in there. Okay, so we've got, that is the V right there that is closest to our hook. You notice it's not the loop on our hook. It is that little V right there. That's the turning chain. That's the one we skip. So then we come down to the next one right there. And see, it's a little looser now because I've already had my hook in there. So that's the one we want to go to. And we insert our hook under both of those 2 loops. We should have 1 loop in the back. And then we yarn over. You can see it doesn't have to be a motion where we necessarily bring the yarn up and over. You can also use your hook to, now I'm all turned around. Now you can use your, where am I here? There we are. I have to make that stitch again. Use your hook to go and grab the yarn. You just want to make sure it's coming over the top. Pull that loop up and through. Yarn over and pull through 2. So we've got, it's getting a little loose because I've worked in this chain a couple times. So if I was actually making this into a project, I'd probably pull it out and make these chains nice and tight, well, tighter than they are again. But there is a chain right there that we skipped. That's our turning chain. So we don't want to come back and work into that. Now, there's exceptions to this rule, like anything else in crochet. Basically, we're pulling yarn through and creating loops. But as you advance in crochet, you'll see you can stick that hook just about anywhere and get a cool, different effect. So there's the next chain right there. So we've gone under both of those loops and we yarn over and pull through and yarn over and pull through. So I want to talk about a couple of other skills here before we do run out of time, since this is pre-recorded. You'll run into things called skip a stitch. That's a really common instruction that you'll see, and it might be confusing if you've never seen that before. So it might mean a stitch like one of these. It might be skip a chain, but skipping it just literally means that. Skip it. Just pretend it's not there. Ignore it, go to the next one. So if I were making a pattern that said to make 2 single crochets, skip the next chain and single crochet again, I would just go ahead and literally skip over that one and go to the next one and make my single crochet or whatever stitch was called for. If it starts to get a little twisted on you, just go ahead and take your time and straighten it out and make your stitch. And you can see there's that little gap right there where I skipped over the stitch. So again, it doesn't matter if it's a chain or if it's a stitch you're making later. Skipping it literally just means skip it. Just miss it altogether. Now I want to make a couple more stitches here so that I can show you some more stitches, but I also want to show you how we turn and continue to work in our rows here. So if you'll excuse me, I'm going to make these a little bit quicker. So I've got a little bit of space to work into on our tiny little swatch here. And a swatch is something as you progress in crochet that you'll make to check and make sure that your stitches are the same size as the designer's stitches so that your finished project can be the same size as theirs. All right, so there we've got a quick little row of single crochets. Now we're going to make a row of half double crochets. Sounds confusing, but it's really just another variation on the stitches we've been making. But first we need to make a turning chain, the ladder, the little ladder that's going to lift us up for the half double crochet row. Now this is a little controversial. Different people have different opinions of how many turning chains you need for your half double crochet row. Some people say 2, some people say 1. I'm one of the people that says 1, but you can try it and do whatever works best for you. So to make our turning chain, you can see I've just got my active loop on my hook. I'm going to yarn over and pull through. Just like we were chaining before, doesn't matter that we've already made stitches, we can make another chain. Then we're going to turn our work. And you'll see this instruction at the end of a lot of patterns that are worked in rows. To turn our work, you want to turn it like the page of a book. Now, I'm right-handed, so it's like I'm going on in the book. If I were left-handed, I'd be going back. So again, because I'm right-handed, I turn my work this way. If I were left-handed, see if I can get my hands to cooperate with me here. We're getting a little chilly in the winter. There we go. So if I were left-handed, I'd be working across and I'd be ready to work into this next row. I would want to turn my work this way. Okay? So let me get my back on my right hand here so I can make sense of what I'm doing. Okay. So I'm going to turn the page of my book, and now we have these stitches we can work into. And remember, at the top of those stitches, each one has a little V. If we look at it from the side, you can actually see a little daylight there. Can you see that? That little hole? That little hole is right under that top V, and that's where we're going to be sticking our hook. So right there, in that little gap of sunshine, that's where we want to stick our hook to make these stitches. Now we're going to skip that turning chain, but we're going to go ahead and work into the top of that stitch right there. So to make a half double crochet, it's a lot like the single crochets you've been making, but before we insert our hook into that stitch, we're going to yarn over and then insert the hook. And now I'm going to go under those top two loops, that top V, right into that little spot that was open. And then we yarn over again, pull that loop up and through. And now you can see, if I spread it out a little bit, we've got 3 loops on that hook. So to finish this stitch, we yarn over one more time and pull through all of those loops. Now, if you get stuck there halfway through, not a big deal. Just take your time and get them all off the hook. And that is a half double crochet. So don't worry, we're going to make a few more. We yarn over, find that next little spot of daylight there. And if you want to, you can really take a look. You can see there's one. So there's the second one. We insert our hook and stop and make sure that both of those loops right there are on top of our hook. Yarn over and pull up our loop. Now we've got 3 loops on the hook. Yarn over again and pull through all of those loops. And you'll notice I do something with my hook here. When I grab the yarn or yarn over with it, I am pointing the hooky part, the little hooky section of it, down towards my work. This is going to let me pull through those loops a little easier without getting caught, like so. So let's do that again. I yarn over. I go into that, oops, it looked like it glitched a little bit there. I want to make sure the video doesn't glitch. We yarn over, go right into that next stitch under both of those loops, yarn over again, pull up a loop. We've got 3 loops on our hook, so we yarn over again and pull that through all 3 of those loops. There we are. So you can see this stitch is a bit taller. We've got our single crochets down here. They're the little short guys. We've got our half double crochets up here, a little bit taller. And if you take a close look, you can see that yarn over we did before we inserted our hook creates a little horizontal line. Oops, wants to go out of focus. There we go. Right there. So these are the little things you can notice as you're practicing these stitches, the little differences in how they look. So let's make a couple more before we move to the next stitch. We yarn over, go into the next stitch, yarn over again, pull up a loop, yarn over, and pull through all the loops on the hook. And again, that's a half double crochet. Now you can see here, we've come to that stitch with my stitch marker in it. I know this is the last stitch of my round. This is really helpful as you're getting started because it's so easy to lose those stitches. Probably should have gone ahead and put one in the first stitch of this row too, but for the sake of time now, I'm going to go ahead and skip it. But I'm going to yarn over, go right under those top 2 loops, the same place I put my stitch marker, right there. Yarn over, pull up our loop, and yarn over and pull through all 3. So now I have a little row of half double crochets. All right, I'm going to get this stitch marker out of my way so we can continue because I want to show you double crochet, which is probably one of the most popular stitches. And again, it's just a variation of what we've already been doing, but it is a taller stitch. So now we definitely need to make more turning chains for our little ladder that's going to lift us up. And the standard way to do it as a beginner, again, this is something you can get fancy with later, but the standard way to do a turning chain for a row of double crochet is to chain 3. So you can see I've got my active loop here. I'm going to yarn over and make 3 chains. So there's 1, 2, 3. And that third one we made right here is going to count as the top of our first double crochet stitch for our row. We didn't make a double crochet, we just made a chain 3. But with most basic patterns, that chain 3 will count as our first double crochet. So I'm going to go ahead and put my stitch marker, get that loop out of the way there so we can see it, right? Again, under those top 2 loops. Each of these stitches is going to make those top 2 loops, that little V. So we can put our stitch marker right in there. Oop, there we go. And that will mark our stitch. So I'll get my hook. Oop, see, the loop got turned around. Get that straightened out. And now we can turn to work back the other way. And again, I made my chain 3, and then I just turned it like the page of a book. So since that chain 3 counts as our first double crochet, in this case, we would not work back into that first stitch because then we would be doing something called increasing. We'd be adding stitches. We'd be increasing the number of stitches we have. We've already got our first stitch, which is our chain 3, so we are going to skip this stitch. Just like I was talking about before with skipping, we just ignore it and go right on to the next one. So we look for that next little hole right there. See if we can still see a little bit of daylight in there. And now let's make a double crochet. Starts out just like the half double crochet. We yarn over, go into that stitch under both of those top 2 loops, yarn over again, pull a loop up right through there. Now, just like before, we've got 3 loops on our hook, but this time we're going to yarn over and go through just the first 2, and then yarn over again and go through the last 2. So there, let me hold that up so you can take a look at it, is a double crochet. And there we go, tiny little thing. Let me move it around here. That is what it looks like from behind, just a little bit different. So again, as you're practicing the stitches, I always recommend, obviously take your time and have fun, but really try and pay attention a little bit to the stitches as you're making them, and you'll see how each of these little pieces and yarn overs works to create that stitch. So let's do a couple more double crochets here before we get to some finishing off instructions. So you can see here, I've yarned over. I'll do it again. Yarn over, go into the next stitch. So we can see we've worked into that little hole right there. Look for the next one in the row. Put our hook right in that little hole under those top 2 loops. Yarn over, pull that loop up and through. Got 3 loops on our hook. Yarn over. And really you're pulling through the first loop. If you look close, you can see that first yarn over before I inserted my hook is just kind of hanging out there. It's not really a loop, but we're going to pull through that loop and then behind that yarn over right there. So now we've got 2 loops on our hook again, and we yarn over and pull through those 2 loops. There we are. You can see even as I make taller stitches, just like when we were making our long chain, when I'm making a taller stitch, I also tend to sort of choke up on it with my non-hook hand. Just helps add a little bit more stability and keep a little bit more even tension on your stitch. So let's do that one more time. I yarn over, find the next stitch. Let's look real close there. You can see there was the stitch we just made. So there's the next hole. Go right in there, yarn over again, pull up a loop. Now we've got 3 loops on our hook, yarn over, pull through 2, yarn over, and pull through 2. Again, that is a double crochet. So we had a single crochet, a half double crochet, and a double crochet. And those are the 3 most basic stitches. Now, after that, of course, there is a treble crochet, a quadruple crochet, a quintuple crochet, and it just keeps going on to all the names of the numbers I don't even know. But it's just about how many times are you yarning over? Because you don't have to yarn over just once before you start a stitch. You could yarn over twice, or 3 times, or 4 times. You could work off different multiples of those loops. Those are all going to be different stitches, but as you've seen, it's all the same basic motions. When you want to do something fancy like a post stitch, which is where you can make crochet cables, then that's often made with a tall stitch, so I yarned over. But instead of going to the top of a stitch, you'll go around the post of the stitch. And the post is that little, basically the little stand-up part there. It's not the top of the stitch, it's the body of the stitch itself. For those, you're going around the post of the stitch. So there's lots and lots of different variations of these same basic moves that are going to give you basically everything you do in crochet. There's not a lot beyond that other than how many times you yarn over, what order you work those loops off in, and where you're sticking your hook. So when you have finished your project, you need to finish off and weave in your ends. And I wanted to make sure that you knew how to do this too. Now, I don't know what goofy little thing we've made right here. This is just my little swatch for showing you, but we're going to pretend I love it. It's finished. It's done. Or maybe this is my practice swatch and I want to go ahead and set it aside so I can compare my later work to it and feel how good about how far I've come. So I'm going to go ahead and remove my hook. We don't have to do anything too fancy. Going to go ahead and cut the yarn. I want to leave at least a good 6 inches here so I can do what I'm going to show you in a minute, which is called weaving in our ends. This is how we secure our ends so that our work doesn't come undone. So if it's a really thick yarn, I'd recommend leaving even longer. The thicker the yarn, just the more space you need to work with, basically. But I'm going to go with about 6 inches here. So I'll just go ahead and cut it. This can be called breaking the yarn, cutting the yarn, finishing off. There's so many different terms, but they all kind of mean the same thing. Go ahead and cut your yarn or break it if you're strong enough. And then I'm just going to use my hook one last time here. You can see I've got that last active loop on my hook. I'm going to yarn over with this end and pull it all the way through, just like that. Now, I'm not going to pull it tight because I want to show it one more time. And if I pull it tight, I won't be able to show it again. So let me pull that back out. There we are. So we've got that loop on our hook. We've cut our yarn. We're ready to finish off. So we yarn over and pull that little tail end all the way through. Then when we give it a little tug, you can see that stitch isn't going anywhere. It's nice and tight. There's a problem though. Some people think, okay, I'm done. Let's trim off the yarn. Don't do it. Don't cut your yarn right there. If you cut your yarn right there, it'll wiggle its way right out of that knot. Your stitches are going to come undone and you're going to be in trouble. This is where, I have to find it where I put on the desk here. This is where that yarn needle comes in. And if you don't have a yarn needle, you can use your hook a little bit to do this, sort of wiggling between the stitches and using your hook, but it's a lot easier if you have a yarn needle. So what I'm going to do is I take each one of those ends, and it doesn't matter which one you do first or anything like that, personal preference, and you want to get the yarn in the needle. It's kind of a silly thing to do, but it can be hard to thread yarn. It comes apart. You can see it's not like a thread. It has different pieces to it. So I just like to fold it over my needle to create a nice little smooth pinch. Doesn't want to focus. There we are. And then I can slide the eye of the needle right over that little pinch. So that will help you get started. So then to weave in your ends, you just want to send your yarn needle into the stitches. And this does take a little bit of practice, but basically we're just hiding the end of the yarn inside the stitches. And you want to weave these ends in for a few inches. Don't say, okay, that's good, cut it here. Nope, still too short. And I specifically recommend that you work a couple different directions. So let's say I came down that stitch. Now I'm working this way. I'll pull this through. Now I'm going to go back the opposite direction. And that's what's really going to help lock that in. So definitely you'll want to practice weaving in your ends just like everything else. The more you do it, the better looking it'll get. And after you've woven in several of those inches, then that's when you can go ahead and cut off that yarn close to your project, and the end will be nice and secure. Go ahead and do that with your other end, and you'll be all set. And we made it. We got through, I think, everything. The only thing I didn't get a chance to talk about, and I know we're going over, but I'm going to do it real quick, is that there is a pattern provided with this class that makes this really fun, really simple mug rug. I have now shown you all the skills you need to make this. And because I want you to also be able to learn to read patterns, I've provided the written pattern for this in 2 different formats. You'll see here, I'm going to make sure it's centered here. We've got row one on here twice. The first row 1 is written the same way you'd see a standard crochet pattern. Anything written on my blog, it's going to have sort of this format. Underneath, this row 1 is written in plain English. So you can take a look at that, take a look at this, see how they compare, and see things like the slip knot. No pattern is going to tell you to make a slip knot first. That's just assumed. That's just, it's kind of like cooking. They're not going to tell you to put on an apron. You have to make the slip knot on your own and then follow the instructions from there. So I think we can come back to me and go ahead and finish this off. Thank you for sticking with me, you guys. I know that was a little quick, but hopefully you can refer to this video again and again. Jenny, you're on mute.
You'd think after a year of working remotely, I would have mastered Zoom by now, but no. If you want to go back to the screen share real quick, Tamara, we can wrap things up here.
Absolutely. There we go. Next page.
Yeah. One more.
Okay. One more?
Okay. Yeah, this one right here.
Okay.
Now that you guys have all mastered, well, you will soon to be the basics of crochet. If you guys want to learn a few more fancy techniques, we are hosting some advanced crochet classes in February. So these are the topics that we will be going over, and Marley Bird will be teaching these classes. I'm not sure if you're familiar with her, but she is another one of our go-to crochet experts that we work with over at Fave Crafts. And Tamara works with her as well. They're great buddies. So you will be learning from another expert in the field. We have crochet cables on February 8th, crochet broomstick lace on the 15th, and on the 22nd of February, we will be learning how to do crochet color pooling. So all of these classes, they are paid classes. I know today's was free, but these are paid. You can actually buy the whole bundle for $29.99. Otherwise, each class is sold individually for $19.99. And there's a link at the bottom of this slide to sign up for those classes. I can also post it in the chat as well. And then if you want to go to the next slide.
All righty. I got to just interject. If you want to learn crochet color pooling, you can't learn from anybody better than Marley. She's the expert.
I'm sure she would love to know that you said that. But yeah, so then again, I just wanted to say thank you all for joining us today. My name is Jenny. I work at Fave Crafts. Favecrafts.com is a wonderful resource for all different kinds of free patterns. We have crochet patterns, knitting patterns, plus just general crafts. We also have allfreecrochet.com, which is another free resource for patterns. Plus, I Like Crochet is our sponsor today. So I know we've talked about this a few times today. So this is actually a paid digital magazine, and we do have an introductory offer for all of you today for just $11.88. You get a whole year subscription to the wonderful magazine. Tamara Kelly, thank you so much for leading our class today. If you have any questions, I know we didn't get to everyone's questions in the Q&A, but my contact information is right here. So please feel free to reach out to me, and I will do my best to get everything answered via email. Otherwise, please feel free to reach out to Tamara directly. Here are her social media channels, and she's got contact info on all of her sites as well. So,
and I do, thanks to the miracle of technology, have left-handed videos. Thankfully, with technology, I'm able to make those. I don't film them left-handed, but we can flip them. So those are available on my channel as well.
Perfect. Yes. And today's class was recorded, so we will be sending out a link to the video recording 24 hours from now, so that you guys can practice and go from there. So,
okay. Well, thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. Thank you guys for joining us. And thank you, Tamara, for leading the show. It was wonderful.
Absolutely. Keep chaining, everybody.
Yes. Have a good afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you.